It did not print front to back, so it's a lot of paper. It made a print. Like,
It's an impressive statement.
yeah, the copier did that. Now I went through on the Word doc that and just put out any kind of particulars that I thought.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, so my plan is to go, I've got notes on each of like little kind of keywords and notes by each of the standards.
Okay, cool.
And I'm just gonna go over that, and then when there's a question, we can go to the actual language.
Okay.
And then for the ones you've highlighted, we'll go to the actual
Okay.
language.
That's probably mostly the same thing. We're good to start.
Okay. So, do I need to unmute? Can people hear me?
We hear you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And I will stay muted. Okay, thanks folks for moving the meeting around and taking time to learn about this project. Did everybody hear, was everyone aware of this? The last meeting I presented, or was everybody there?
The Erica would not have been there.
Okay.
Phil would have been there.
Okay, all right. So to back up a little bit, what we're doing is over the last few months have been working to take the design guidelines that were adopted in the downtown master plan, which was part of our comprehensive plan, chapter 5 of our comprehensive plan, but also its own standalone document here. And in this document, there is a set of standards, design guidelines that would be specific to downtown, that are intended to create, quality outcomes with new development that's compatible with our existing downtown, that expands the traditional urban form and the walkable nature of this area. And so taking the master plan design guidelines and putting them into ordinance form so that they're in an adoptable language that we can then take to planning board and city council is one of our implementation projects. We were kind of slow to start on it because of some changes to state law that limited cities' ability to rezone properties in a way that's considered a downzoning. So we've had to be nimble. We've identified a path forward that we think is compliant with state law that will allow us to do this, but it did slow us down a little bit. The way that we want to do it is, and traditional zoning is often referred to as the underlying zoning, but you can also have overlay districts. So you have underlying zoning that may be different, but the overlay district kind of takes a whole area and says, all right, well, certain rules are going to apply to this whole area, even though the rules in the underlying zoning may be slightly different. There's some kind of unifying attributes that would require that similar standards be met across an area. And so that's the approach that we've identified as adopting an overlay zoning district that incorporates these design standards that come from the downtown master plan. Doing the area that it would cover is essentially shown in this map. We have identified a few other properties at the edges that we would bring in. The design guidelines really focus around 3 kind of main buckets: the public realm, so everything in the right of way; site design, so if you've got a new development, what's happening on the site; and then the actual building design, more architectural considerations. The implementation of this does address several of our, directly or indirectly ties to 5 of our implementation projects from the Gen H comprehensive plan. And it advances 3 goals and 7 of the objectives from the plan. So it's definitely helping us move forward.
I have a copy of the master plan, so if you wanna look at the maps, get closer, this would help.
It's then broken down into 4 smaller sub areas. You can kind of ignore this hatched area on top. That's a height district that was established for the city through a local bill that was passed. But we're really looking at this Main Street in purple, the downtown edge in pink, the lower trailhead in this lime green, and then the 7th Avenue area in this darker green. And there are different standards for those different areas. Let's get through some of this in terms of what it helps advance. So I talked about the character areas, different standards. There's some standards that apply across the whole area. There are certain standards that would apply just to those character districts, where there would be some variance in standards between the districts. There are also streetscape character types. So every street in this area has been assigned a streetscape character. And so, as we know, Main Street is different than Locust Street, and 3rd Avenue is different from Spartanburg Highway, right? There's different characteristics of those streets. And so what are they and what do we want them to be in the future is what we would call the streetscape character. And so this identifies those. It looks at the existing attributes and then also some desired future outcomes that we'd like to see. And there are standards based on whether a property affronts on a particular streetscape character area or streetscape type or not. And so that's a governing factor. So you got the character districts, the streetscape type, and then the building height area. So these 3 maps kind of work together to dictate which standards have to be met. And so the building height, you've got 40 feet in the area that's kind of the gold. You've got a max height of 64 in the pink, which is a good bit of what is already allowed today. Then you've got it going back to 40 on the frontage on Main Street, because that matches what our historic buildings, that height now. But as you move towards the alley, halfway back on those parcels, it does step up to a height of 54 feet as an allowed max height. So looking at the public realm, what I've got here are the different sections of the ordinance that have different standards that have to be met. And I've got some kind of keywords, kind of short descriptions that I'll go over. And if there's something that you are like, hey, what does that mean? Or can you talk about that more? I can go to the actual text and we can talk about that. So just let me know if you see something that you want to learn more about.
I got one.
Yeah.
Down zoning.
Down zoning, okay. So there's a whole rabbit trail there, but so down zoning is when you would, like traditionally down zoning is, let's say you have a property that's zoned commercial and you're either a neighbor or the city or any entity, requested or approved a rezoning of that property from commercial to residential. You now have gone from kind of one level of allowances and intensity of land use to something that's a lot less intense, in lot less economic value between commercial and residential. So that idea of lowering in intensity of land use is downzoning. The state of North Carolina in December of 2024 passed a law, overrode a governor's veto in a Hurricane Helene relief bill, stripped all of the city's authorities throughout the entire state to downzone any property, which had always been another person your neighbor couldn't be like, hey, I'm gonna petition to rezone this guy's property and it'd be a downzoning. But the city could in order to achieve its visions that future land use maps and things that have been informed by public input. So that was done and it defined downzoning a specific way. One is that the list of uses, so each zoning district has a list of land uses that you can have or do in that zoning district. So you cannot reduce the overall number of land uses that's allowed. That's one definition of downzoning. You can't decrease the density. So you can't, if you're allowed to have, 10 apartment units on a piece of property, you can't change the rules so that you only are allowed to have 8, for instance. And then you cannot create any non-conformities in a non-residential zoning district. So we couldn't rezone commercial properties, for instance, with new design standards that would make those existing structures non-conforming, or, essentially where they would have to be grandfathered in, because then they would be limited in what, at some point they would have to conform. And so what we're doing is saying this only applies to new construction, and that's actually a really good point. New construction and additions to buildings, where we are still kind of talking a little bit about exterior renovations. And so I've got some additional meetings coming up with our legal team to clarify exactly how it would be applied. But we've got a whole opening section here about the purpose, the intent, what it's trying to achieve, and then the applicability, which is what kind of we're talking about now. And then the applicability then breaks it down by those things I talked about, the street types, which is both a table of all the streets, the map, the character districts, and then the building height.
So this is what's changing mostly.
All of this is essentially brand new. Like C1 is our Main Street zoning district, underlying zoning district. And it's got some standards, but very, very few. The surrounding area, downtown edge, is pretty much zoned CMU, central mixed use. And it has some design standards, but they're very, very limited. So this is really beefing up the regulations on development within the downtown area.
And just kind of as an example for why, and this has been a topic with downtown for previous community character, and especially came up a lot with 7th Avenue, and where there's buildings. Fortunately, we've got somebody like Lyle who's building, in the form that's already fitting with the downtown plan as far as building it up to the sidewalk. But how it is without any kind of overlay, it would be things that would be rebuilt, more like how the like further down or across the train tracks where the model railroad is, or even where White Duck is.
Mhm.
Like if that building were to come down, we really want that, like that one's not coming down. But as an example, that one's got like the setback there where it doesn't really fit with the form of the other buildings further down. And so that's particularly why the downtown board has talked about this for a while. It's like, gosh, some of these buildings that are in disrepair come down. We want to make sure that something is built back that fits with the downtown style.
So the overlay takes precedence over the original for any new or modifications.
It would, the stricter of the two would apply, so the underlying zoning would still stay in place.
Yeah.
If they conflicted at all, then the stricter would rule. And this actually brings up, good point that in C2, for instance, we've reduced that setback. But like these setbacks are a lot different. We're trying to bring the buildings up to the we'll get into. And so we want to make sure that like that's actually less restrictive. Sorry, I'm making a note. And so if it's the stricter of the two, we have to clarify that doesn't apply to, and height is the same way. There's some areas that currently you can build up to 64 feet, but under this map would be limited to 40 feet. Mainly thinking about the residential area along MLK between 7th that's got zone CMU. I think this is probably a more appropriate height in that area along Seventh and you don't have a lot of real tall buildings, and I think that would change the character pretty drastically. So we're gonna be kind of at odds with our underlying zoning. And maybe we clean that up one day, but for now, it would just defer to the overlay district. And that's written in here. Another example is the historic district. So you guys know, local properties located within a locally designated historic district overlay and the downtown design overlay are subject to both sets of development standards. If a provision of the downtown design overlay district standards are inconsistent with locally designated historic district standards, the locally designated historic district design standards shall govern. So we're deferring to the historic design standards. If zoning doesn't match up, the more restrictive provision shall govern. I mean, I've got, unless the terms of more restrictive provisions so specify otherwise. So you can call out things like where the height is different or the setbacks may be different. And we want it to be the downtown design overlay that rules there. So trying to cover all our bases on how to apply this thing. So just going through the standards real quick, starting with the public realm. So again, the area that would be in the right of way. First thing we have is the block layout. So you've got the existing pattern of streets, and there are some places where it doesn't connect that with new private development in certain areas, it could connect. So we want to expand that interconnected grid network through this process. We want to utilize alleys as much as possible. Really sort of removing a lot of the vehicular movements away from the primary streets, just to make it more walkable, just like we have downtown on Main Street. The width of sidewalks and where they're placed, so you're going to have other streetscape character types are going to have different widths of sidewalks. And I've built out a table. This is based on what was in the downtown master plan, but it's evolved. And so what you've got is each of the streets, and it's actually broken down into segments. So for instance, North Main Street from Asheville Highway to Locust Street has a different wide right of way width. So that everywhere there was some kind of difference in character, we created its own segment. So that we could say that one's 60 feet instead of North Main from Allen to North King Street, the right of way is 100 feet. Different characteristics there. Then we went on, in addition to right of way width, we've got the travel lane width for the vehicles, whether on-street parking is present or not, and then what if it's parallel or angled or on one side or both sides. Width of the sidewalks, the spacing between street trees, the width of the planting strip or the amenity zone, and then whether there's bicycle facilities and what type of bicycle facilities. So all this is in a table. So if your property is on Asheville Highway between North Main and Oakland, you can go to this and you can figure out what it is, what that character type is supposed to be. Now, they're not building the road, so the travel lane width is really to guide the city's portion of that, but it also helps the new development to know where they would where a building is going to land as it relates to future right of way width, and we'll get into that. So all these things kind of build on each other. The bike facilities I mentioned, they would have to provide the sidewalk, they'd have to provide the bike lane, most likely pay a fee in lieu of the bike lane, because you wouldn't have a bike lane just in front of one property that wouldn't go anywhere. But you may have a Shero marking that would make more sense, or you'd pay a fee in lieu for a greenway. We've got the above the mud connection through here. But then there's also some caveats for if it's a really small scale project that there's just no way it could absorb paying the city a fee of what it would cost for them to build a greenway, next to their property. When those things are really out of balance, then we can waive that requirement. In certain along different streets, there may be different types of amenities, lighting, benches, planters, bike racks, bowl outs, street trees, all kinds of different streetscape elements that could be placed right kind of in the sidewalk adjacent to the street trees.
And we also added in there possible public art.
Yep, public art got added in here. We've got these references to these actual cross sections that are in the downtown master plan. So you can kind of get an idea of, where these things will be placed, how it's coordinated with the street trees. You can see benches, lighting, the bulb outs, things of that nature. And each streetscape is and then these maps show which streets would have those kind of characteristics. The most prevalent is downtown. It's got a lot of streets. And so the document references these cross sections as well. And then outdoor gathering areas are encouraged. There's some more about on-site. This would be publicly accessible areas. So public outdoor seating areas, plazas, gathering spaces shall be permitted. Such spaces shall remain accessible from the public sidewalk, shall not impede pedestrian service. So it allows for you to incorporate that into your project. And there's some more on that later. I mentioned the cross sections here, just a little visual aid. This is also where we get a lot of the information from the table. So each of these letters corresponds with the letters here. So like the sidewalk width, for instance, is E, and it gives a range of 10.5 feet to 15.5 feet. The range is because the right-of-way width is a range as well. We can't really work with ranges if a property is on a particular street and we're like, yeah, the right of way needs to be somewhere between 50 and 100 feet. That's not going to be good enough for a new project. It needs to be very clear and cut and dry. So that's another reason why that table was updated so that each street segment has a specific right of way width, because that then dictates what happens just outside the right of way. I mentioned the table, showed you that. So then we get in so that was public realm, and then you get into the site design. And this is probably the most important thing, I think, in this entire document is establishing these minimum setbacks and maximum setbacks and the build to percentage. And so what that means is so the right of way, you see this one points to the edge of the right of way. So this is the sidewalk, this kind of light color, and then this is a planting strip, and then this is the street. You got a curb and the street. So all of that is in the public right of way. So then the building has a minimum setback of 0 if it's on a primary frontage type, right? So primary other, secondary, and tertiary. I'll explain that real quick. So the street types, Main Street, Downtown One Way, and Boulevard are all considered primary. If you're abutting a park or a trail, you're primary other. If you're on the street type of downtown or Festival Street, it's secondary. And then the residential connector and connector streets are considered tertiary. So once you know what your frontage is, then you can figure out what your minimum setback is. And the only one that has a minimum setback is tertiary. So that's gonna be more of your residential areas, 16-foot minimum setback. And then you have your maximum setback. It's the most you can go back. So on our primary streets, we're saying it's 0 is the furthest you can go back from the right edge of the right of way. Unless this caveat, you can go back a max of 10 feet if you have outdoor dining, outdoor public space. So you're still kind of creating an expansion of the public right of way. And then you can, on primary other, you can go back 10 feet, secondary 10 feet, and then tertiary a maximum of 20 feet. And then the build to percentage is how much of the building edge, how much of that facade that's running along the front of the parcel, how much of the parcel is that building? If you think about Main Street, all the blocks of buildings, those are buildings that go from all the way from one side of the parcel line to the other side. It's 100% frontage, 100% build to percentage. So we're not quite going that far, but we do want to maintain that street edge, that street wall, if you will. That's a really important urban design feature that establishes walkability, creates a sense of comfort for folks who are on foot. And so we've got 80% of this on this build to percentage up until you get to tertiary. A 10-foot side setback only if you're abutting single family residential, otherwise it'd be 0. And the rear setback is 0 unless you have a single family residential where it would be a 20-foot setback. So this to me is probably the most important thing, and just getting the buildings where in the right place to match the form that we have. I'm sure all of us, can notice and observe, where that changes, right? If you're going down Main Street, for instance, you get to Allen, to Barnwell, and then the next block, you've got the visitor center and I guess there's a vacant parcel. No, the church on the other corner. All of a sudden, South Main Street changes in character. Those buildings shift back, and that drastically changes the character. So,
But then for those couple of empty parcels a little bit further down, should they be rebuilt for something, we want them to be built with a setback inside design that we have in this plan, rather than having that more spread out, because the idea would be extending it more of the downtown area instead of making it more car focused. Right.
any questions on that? It's a pretty big part.
That makes sense. We talked about that one a lot in this committee.
Yeah. So getting parking is going to be another one that's probably we need to maybe spend some time looking at. So this says that surface parking is not permitted as a standalone use. So you could have parking for your business, but you wouldn't be able to have your business be parking. So unless there are some caveats that if you're in the lower Trailhead area or the 7th Avenue area, this does allow to have trailhead parking with a maximum of 10 parking spaces. So not enough to really be like, oh, I'm gonna tear down this house and pave the parcel and create a parking lot, because 10 parking spaces isn't gonna warrant that, or you're not gonna get the return. So we wanted to limit it so that we didn't have that necessarily happen. And we don't want a lot of surface parking. But we, as a city, the desirable outcome is to have your parking garages where you go up, your parking, is more efficient. And that also helps to create the urban design and urban form that you're looking for. We've talked about the breakdown of that urban form when buildings are set back. You also have that when you have surface parking lots that pop up as you're walking along the street. All of a sudden, it's not nearly as comfortable
as, when you're walking along the edge of buildings.
But a question on that, which this might fit more in public areas, but some of the areas a little further east on Seventh and down at the trail might be flood zone areas where things can't be built. Have we? I just now thought about that.
Yeah.
That have no other buildable use.
Yeah, increasing it if it's a flood area.
I'm a little baffled here. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but so we don't want surface parking. And I presume that means private. Dedicated
Correct.
surface parking, okay, so, and we're not going to have, more garages because nobody's gonna pay for them.
Mhm.
So where do we get our parking from? Because, the allocated spaces on street side parking don't handle the requirements. So I don't, what's in between? Where do we get? That tells me that the city has to find dirt to put public parking on, even if it's paid. But is that what we're looking at?
The idea would be that parking is consolidated, rather than individual lots or, a proliferation of surface lots within this walkable area of town. To combat that, we would have consolidated parking spots.
Or if there was like new development showing that percentage where your building's at the front, maybe you'd have parking in the back.
Yes, so you can have surface parking
Correct. Just not front.
with a building, it just can't be standalone, as the only thing there is a parking lot.
Which would be just like one building, one property. They could do that if there was like a new development.
Well, that's like, Matt has 8 parking
Yeah.
spots, beside the bakery.
Yeah, I think what this, and this is worth talking about too, but I think the main goal is like, especially with some of the buildings that have not great value. It wouldn't be good for the whole district for that to be plowed down and just be used for parking without an active use. But especially in Seventh, there is limited space for like surface parking in general.
We got nothing.
Yeah.
But for example, like the cleaners business on King Street here, you wouldn't be able to build something like that on Main Street where they have like the parking lot right up front and then the building set back.
Correct.
On the back part of the property.
So standalone parking, let's just go through this whole section on parking. I'll go through the actual language. It starts to add together. But we'll come back to the trailhead parking. If you do have surface parking, which is different than trailhead parking, surface parking is just, not structured, not in a parking garage. In association with multifamily residential or non-residential principal uses, surface parking areas shall be screened from public streets using at least one of the following methods: landscaping, walls, or buildings. So it'd be screened. So it'd be to the rear. Surface parking shall not be located between the principal building and the primary street frontage, just like you described with the parking. Parking areas shall be located behind buildings or to the side of buildings where rear replacement is infeasible. And then you can do some bioretention or even most of these are going to be under the trigger point for requiring stormwater. But if they wanted to control some stormwater, we just put that in here to encourage it and have it reviewed by our stormwater administrator. So structured parking. So parking structures are encouraged within downtown to reduce the footprint of surface lots. Developments requiring 150 vehicular parking spaces or more must utilize structured and or shared parking. So there's a good example. So let's say there is a new hotel or some kind of larger building, that triggers this, they would have to build a structure to accommodate that parking.
They would
We're not
have to
gonna-
like-
Yeah, we would not permit that just to be, a massive parking lot right in downtown. But it doesn't have to be a parking structure if they're able to figure out a shared parking plan as well, so that utilizing other parking that's within a certain distance of their development. Maybe that's in a parking garage, maybe that's in a public parking garage. City has a parking deck that's got, spaces that are underutilized. They can get into an agreement with, hypothetical hotel to have, monthly permits or whatever it costs. And that's a way to continue to put revenue into the parking enterprise fund to continue to consolidate where we put our parking. So we're freeing up developable land with something other than vehicular parking. People do not come to downtown to drive. They come here to walk around.
And that's like an important distinction, because I've heard on the street kind of similar to what Phil was talking about. When I hear criticisms of the new streetscape, it's like, all the roads, they built them so narrow you can't get around. But they don't realize that that was like deliberate and intentional and future, it's the opposite of myopia, like looking forward. They feel like they're losing something if I can't drive my big truck down 7th Avenue like I used to, and like turn right onto Lucas Street and then, take a shortcut to the Asheville Highway. They feel like someone's taken away from them, but they don't realize that you're gaining preservation of the thing that we all love. And everybody that's like, hey, I wish the government wouldn't do things. It's like, this is the best attempt at like keeping things the way we all like it. I think that's like your sales pitch.
Yeah. And a lot of it's about safety.
Yeah.
And it's not just considering when you're behind the wheels of a big giant metal box, that is all about convenience and, time saving and congestion management, but slower speed, higher speeds and being able to whip through places is what kills people.
And
So it's really about safety.
And as we look ahead like 30 years or so, with growth coming and development coming, more people are coming. You say, where the parking is, where's it going to be? What are we going to do? We want it to be outside, and we want to draw people walking on foot.
That's right.
And towards these districts.
That's right.
So it's a hard, when anytime anything changes, people are going to be like, why?
Yeah.
We're losing something.
You're really nailing the idea. If we want to preserve, a lot of this is about preserving the character of the city, and how do you grow and do that?
Because I can imagine a growth where development comes, people comes, let's bulldoze this building,
Changes everything.
bulldoze that building, here comes Home Depot.
Widen the road, because now we got to bring in all the people who, we didn't go up, we went out.
And
So now
as,
everybody has to drive absolutely everywhere. Well, now we're widening roads,
and as Hendersonville grows, you lose small town and you become big city.
And kind of to Bill's question on the surface parking, if it's already if it's already a lot that doesn't have anything built on it, that wouldn't be new construction, so then the surface parking would be allowed on currently vacant lots.
It'd be a new use. We would be saying that, this is probably one of the trickier
Yeah,
items, because you'd start to toe into the down zoning question.
yeah, cause and what makes me kind of.
It would be new uses. So
That's
there's,
what my question was too, like, even with your building, not that I hope you're always there. But like the White Duck, when I purchased that building, that where your picnic tables are, it was parking.
right.
It's
And
not
so-
currently used for parking.
And that would be okay because it's an accessory to the building,
To
but
the
what
building.
this has is just like on South Main Street where there's just whole parcels that are just private
Sitting,
parking.
Yeah,
But I am.
They are, if they're parking now, they're parking now. That
Yeah.
doesn't change.
so it's just new,
It's new.
the
Yeah,
future, not
Yeah.
allowing it
right. We wouldn't be able to
to just be
be
empty.
like, sorry, can't do that anymore all of a sudden. Can't do that.
My concern would be like businesses coming in and not so much even foot traffic, but their own staff. Like now I let the staff park behind our lot. If I shut that off and it's like customers only, my staff would then be taking the up and down 7th Avenue all day long.
Yeah.
Well, so I'll throw you a curveball, all right? The railroad decides,
Yeah.
all right, okay, we're done with it, and we're gonna sell this off to Carolina Conservation or whoever. And, oh, by the way, the right of way, which you're parking on,
Mhm.
right, goes with it. And then it's a question of, you know, how philanthropic are the new owners going to be about parking spaces? And
In that particular case, I think with Boxcar and Maple both being in the railroad right of way, that it would be, there's like an established maintenance and investment and use by the part of the city for those streets. So there's like, it basically, what's that called? Adversely possessed it.
Yeah. It's been used that way for so many years.
Right.
And on Maple Street, that's kind of what's going on anyways, in that mixed use district, it's.
Even where we built the parking, it was just
Yeah.
built the
Mhm.
right way, just.
Yeah.
Track.
Yeah.
And, one that kind of on the surface, so using the Dogwood parking lot, for example. So eventually that might have something built on it.
Great example.
And that's something that we've talked about in the city is we're gonna need to find some solutions for a lot of the permitted parking that's there. All those employees from Mass General Store over there. But that is something that we do, like, so as the city. That is something that we've been looking at is where are some other alternatives, even if it's in a shorter term before additional. Structured parking were to go into place. There's not anywhere that we would like plow down, but there might be some places that we want to make. Some agreements on or some improvements on with other surface parking. For downtown that might not necessarily be currently built for surface parking, but doesn't have building on it, or to that matter. Would that be?
Allowed?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean. The hard thing about this is there's totally gonna be a double standard between
Yeah.
public and private.
yeah,
And that's just part of the public rationale for surface parking is not a profit-making venture. It's to,
surface thing.
yeah, well, that, but then in the bigger picture, you're trying to provide enough parking to have a thriving city. And you're trying to do it in a way that doesn't detract from the character of that area. I
Right.
think that's the big part of it. And so the more that you can do that, then Dogwood lot, be like, this doesn't have to be a parking lot anymore.
Yeah.
It could be a hotel. So what's better for the city and for the residents, to have a hotel, a nice downtown hotel or so that's the idea, especially if you start, walking along, what was that, Fourth Avenue? Fifth,
Mhm.
both sides, Fourth and Fifth. You're gonna have a totally different experience now with a hotel there. You would walking
Yeah.
next to that big asphalt parking lot. So
But there's-
that's really it's a long range vision. So there's a double standard because there are total different intents behind a private parking lot.
growth begets a need for parking, right? Parking costs money, right? And in today's environment, right? You can't give the parking away in a growth oriented, maybe in some place it's just
Right.
coasting along where there's not a demand.
Right.
But what was the situation here 8 years ago?
Right.
Right? You could never get a parking space on Main Street, ever. Unless it was, late at night.
Yeah.
Right? Because there were so many spaces being taken for weeks or months at a time, and they're all gone. The only way to back that off was to put meters on it and piss off 10% of the people and say, oh, well, too bad.
Yeah.
You weren't really coming down here that often anyway.
Right.
Feels like you're taking something from me.
Oh, yeah, you're
Now-
ruining my city, which you only visit once or twice a month. So, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, but it's what growth brings to the table. You got to pay.
Yeah.
You got to pay for it somehow.
Then there's always trade-offs. It's never like a silver bullet that's gonna make everybody happy. And it's really pretty wild to me how fired up people get about parking and what a big deal it is to people. When you can find a spot and walk not that far. Now, nobody wants to contend with Church Street and King Street. We've created a bit of, or DOT's created a bit of an island with our downtown. And so that's a whole nother, part of this as well, is that public realm and part of our broader planning efforts with DOT, but the streets have such an impact. But again, you're walking just about as far to go get a gallon of milk when you go park at the gas station and walk in. I think you guys are all familiar. Maybe seeing some of those videos where people time themselves downtown versus at a Walmart. It's the same, exactly the same. Or safer streets. So let's see. Parking decks would also at a certain point have to be wrapped with buildings so that you don't just have like we have on Fourth Avenue, just a parking deck on that first level. You want to utilize that, but make that active and interactive with some kind of storefronts, and then have the parking deck kind of behind that. So some standards there along just kind of the design of the structured parking, some allowances for smaller, reduced width parking spaces for compact vehicles. Then we get into parking space requirements. Parking minimums are based on right now, whatever land use you're using. If you have an office building, the number of parking spaces you have to have is based on the square footage of your office building or the number of employees you have. So that would still be the case everywhere except for the Main Street district. In the Main Street district, you can also pay a fee in lieu. The minimum parking is a lot reduced in Main Street. There's no parking requirements if you have a non-residential, any kind of business. For residential, there's no parking until you get over 5 units. Once you get over 5 units, you have to have 1 space per unit. That can be really tricky for some of these places. So you can we have a fee in lieu that we would allow. So, the parking's not on site for those, 10 units. They have a monthly permit with the city and they pay a one-time, fee in lieu to the city in the enterprise fund for parking to be able to do that so that they don't have to provide any on-site parking. And this should say, well, no, that way. So then on-street parking. So eligible on-street parking spaces may be utilized to meet the parking requirements. So you can do a fee in lieu, or you can use on-street parking if there's on-street parking in front of your property, either existing or you are able to delineate new on-street parking because there's enough right of way, there's enough space from the intersection, and all the different rules for where you can put on-street parking, how wide it has to be, how long it has to be, etc. If you can squeeze in some of that, you can count that towards your parking requirements. And then we also have parking maximums, so that we, again, not trying to have a proliferation. We see this a lot. New development will far exceed our parking minimums. New development, I mean, it costs them land, it costs them money, but boy, they want the parking to be as convenient and perceived as open and just a non-issue. So they dedicate a lot of space to parking. So this would prevent that from being just a real proliferation of it. Except you could overbuild your parking. If you had a shared parking if you were trying to overbuild like a parking structure, right? You're making a big investment. You're already sunk cost into it. If you want to add more spaces, that then could be used to accommodate shared parking for other uses as a kind of a way as a revenue stream. And so we added that caveat. Okay, trailhead parking. So this is in the lower trailhead. I'm going to go back just so you guys can picture it again. So lower trailhead, that's all this kind of, Greenville Highway, Spartanburg Highway, and then going out the Houston Trail. So pretty close proximity to Houston Trail, the future above the mud connector, and then Slough to Grade Trail will be coming up through here at some point. So a lot of activity, and then of course the Oklahoma Greenway and Seventh Avenue, potential trailhead parking. So not permitted within the nationally registered or locally designated historic district. So you think right there by Whitted, there's a historic district. We wouldn't allow it on any of that property. They must be spaced 350 feet from each other. That's a city block. In our downtown grid. No more than 10 spaces or fewer. So that's a major limitation. Trying to encourage amenities, water fountains, trash cans, try to keep things clean and nice. And get people thinking about what trail users would experience. And then screening the parking and also encouraging that it be pervious surfaces. So try to keep things green. Shared parking is permitted. It also is for commercial and institutional semi-public uses with 50 or more parking spaces. A minimum of 10% of those total parking spaces should allow for public use during off-peak business hours. So really trying to plug, it says should, but that's to like kind of encourage our church, not that we're getting a whole lot of new churches built, but to try and at least start that conversation between these underutilized parking spaces, parking lots.
Banks.
Bank.
Banks are the big one.
Yeah.
And particularly the church on South Main Street.
Yeah.
But just,
For the big first citizens.
yeah. Massive.
Has there any history of talking to First Citizens with the city?
Not sure
What
if
could
there
happen
has
with
been
that?
in the past.
Should do that, but
Yeah.
this would be a great way to have a
Yeah.
conversation.
I mean,
How often are all those?
never.
Bank, never.
Yeah.
I mean, our back door goes into the alley, that's where our dumpster is, that's where I park right there. And the bottom. I don't know, there's 80 spots down there.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and there is only ever like 4 or 5 cars in there.
Wow.
Are there signs?
I've never even considered that. I've never even looked at it. That's a really
Yeah,
good.
We've talked about it before.
And the problem is even bigger.
Are there signs in there that say that? Like.
Oh,
the way
it
we're
has, the bottom has.
Oh, it has a gate, that's right,
Gates.
that's right. I was gonna say, if there's no signs, then.
I mean, they could make money.
Our
It's a
staff
fee
park
and-
there, on the weekends, the gates are up and they park
Oh,
there.
okay,
But then the top. I gotta think that 10 or 15% of that would be plenty for their staff and their customers.
Yeah, every time I pull in there, it's
Yeah,
pretty
there's,
much empty.
there's nothing up
Like,
there.
they put signs on the ones that front the back of their structure that says for citizens only.
Oh, okay.
And then like, no, they
I was
could.
just-
And then everything else. So I mean, there's gotta be something there.
Yeah.
To strike a deal.
Do you know if Mass, like specifically, has ever talked to them on it, just, cause even just for your employee?
Wow, yeah, you could have a lease with them.
Yeah,
I mean,
but that would, but.
it doesn't even have to be that much money. They would make something that they're not making at all right now.
Yeah,
It's a good idea.
yeah, I could have known that to remind myself.
I have a very, very separate caveat, since we're talking
Yeah.
about mass parking. I think we gotta come up with some kind of, or we should propose some kind of alternative business parking permit. Because I have to have like 35
Mhm.
of my staff, because you can have 2 cars on each, or you can have 3 cars on each pass,
Mhm.
but they can't be there at the same time.
Right,
So I technically have to give everybody their own.
Mhm.
Because if they're ever scheduled at the same time, which happens a couple times a month. In the rarest cases, and several times a week for the full timers,
Mhm.
everyone has to have their own pass. But we're only using 12 to 15 on any given day of our 35
I
passes.
know, whenever we first done the parking permits, we talked about that a lot and just couldn't quite figure out. how to
Is
do
the
it.
permit for a space?
Yeah, each permit is a spot.
It's-
Why not put all the spaces
It's fine.
on the pass?
It's for your license plate.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's,
It's connected to a license plate, and so then when they go through to enforce it, it stays off the plate.
The car is connected to the lot, they pay for that
okay.
Yeah.
parking. But each car has to have its. own-
Two license plates on the same path. Somebody's getting a ticket.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's hard to, yeah, I know we had talked about it initially, but there wasn't how we've got it set up with the plate.
Cause we're buying. Whatever, 25% of that lot.
Can you do it? Do you sell it by like max shift? And they get as many as they need, but they only pay for the max shift, max number of employees during any shift?
Yeah.
That's how it needs to be structured, but it's just, we never quite got there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cause and I think it might have to do with more of the system. Like the software with how it's done, because of just how it's set up, but we can talk more on that.
You gotta talk to First Citizens, you might get a better deal.
Yeah, that might be-
Competition drive,
Yeah.
Yeah, you figure out what your payment is for us and tell First Citizens, you'll pay them that then you might actually have a better,
Oh, our
Feel
employees
free.
will be way happier.
yeah.
Sure.
we've got, we're talking about things being walkable and bikeable. We've got a requirement for multifamily uses to provide storage, so like, as they're thinking about their site design, thinking about their residents having places to store their bikes. And then just bike racks, just like parking for commercial uses, a max of 4 bicycle spaces. And so one of these is 2 spaces, bike on each side. So it's not too cumbersome there. And then the one for the storage, like inside, is 1 per 5 dwelling units. So they may end up, I don't know if that's a good number, that they can always exceed that, right? They're like, well, every other one, like 1 for every 2. So,
Jamie, I meant to tell you too, at our pedal committee meeting, a lot of local bikers said that actual bike parking spots in the garage would be appreciated, because
Okay.
there's spots to put their bikes, but they're in the alley. by
Yeah.
This fancy new garage that's never full of cars anyway, so they were questioning why.
That's something that could probably be done, because there's a couple spaces that are like in some bad corners for cars to go in anyway, that could be.
you could put bike lockers in there too, and
Yeah,
people who live downtown could rent that.
No, that's
You could
good.
have parking and storage.
And it won't take any space.
yeah, it wouldn't take up much at all, I think that's a good idea.
We also have some standards on access and driveways, really trying to limit those driveway kind of curb cuts. And limiting the width and also how many you can have. And if there are parking lots on these, that there be cross connections between neighboring uses. Screening service areas, locating them to the rear, like utility and service areas. And then open space, so on-site open space. If you're in the Main Street area, 5% of your site would have to have some open space. If it's a commercial use, then 50% of that 5% would have to be open to the public. And there are a list of the types of open spaces. So those are not just, untouched land like we have in a lot of subdivisions, but this would design spaces. And it gets a little bit larger as you get out of Main Street. It's just to provide some outdoor areas for folks. Then also that it gets integrated with the public. But if it's a purely residential use, there is no public use. It'd only be if there's a commercial component. Okay, building height. This is probably a big one. So the district, we kind of went over that. I don't know if you have any questions on that, but there are also these transitions. They're between at the edge of the height districts, you would have some step backs. So the one on Main Street is a good example where it's 40 feet and then it steps up to 54. But then as you transition to a neighboring building height district, the first 50 feet of the building have to be at the same level. So that you end up with a kind of a transit. And the same goes for if you're adjacent to a land use, a lower density land use. Let's see. So when the location of a proposed development subject to these standards abuts a property located in a building district with lower maximum height, the height of the proposed development shall not exceed the height maximum of the abutting district for the first 50 feet. Measured from the property lines. This was the change we made. This may be achieved by separating a structure a minimum of 50 feet from the property line or stepping back the height of the structure if built within 50 feet of the property line. So we got an example here. This building was, they moved all the way 50 feet. So their building height, it's the same. This one is within that 50 feet. So they kept it at the same height as the adjacent district until they reached 50 feet and then they went up. So that applies to character area transitions on the edges of these districts. And then when you are budding a property with a single family, 2-family residential zoning district or use. So if it's a single family home, even if it's not zoned residential, you've got to be compatible. And some areas where that is probably going to be really important around the Cooster Trail, I would think. There's some developable land along that. And 7th Avenue. Facade articulation. So if you have a building that's over 100 feet, then you have to have some articulation in the building. So it's not just a long flat wall. So every 40 feet, you have to have offsets that are at least 2 feet deep. If a building is over 150 feet in length, then it requires a courtyard with a minimum of 50-foot width and depth, visible from the street on the primary frontage. So we've got, so this shows an example of that. So that breaks up a longer building. It's really has to be broken up.
So it'd be like an apartment building or a hotel or something, probably more than likely.
Yeah. And then there's some alternative architectural features that will count towards that build to percentage we talked about that fronts on the frontage. Some architectural requirements to create, pedestrian, interesting pedestrian environment. And then additional consideration at the corners for buildings on the corner to have additional architectural features. And then maximum no building should be longer than 300 feet. So that's our city block, corner to corner. Let's see, and then get into building elements. So we did jump into building design. The entrances have to be prominent. They have to be on the primary frontage. Again, additional consideration for corner buildings. Windows shall be vertically proportioned, so they can be taller than they are wide. And some recessing is required and transparency. So the overall percentage of glass on these buildings is dictated. Main Street 60%, downtown edge 60%, and 7th lower ed are 40% transparency.
Vertical window, is there an exception for like storefront windows? Because those are hardly ever vertical. Like a retail window.
Yeah, that's a good point. Should be like upper floor windows.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yes. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Roofs, flat on Main Street, flat on Seventh, like on, fronting on Seventh Avenue. And then outside of that, you could have, pitched roofs. Yeah, oh, if you're on Seventh Avenue, you're kind of thinking down the end towards, closer to the creek. A residential use on Seventh Avenue could have a pitched roof. But non-residential would have flat. Doors, there are a couple of standards there, encourages, recessed doorways like you see in a lot of the storefronts. Ground floor activation, this is really about transparency and having a interactive, ground floor. And having some amenities there, public art, being one of them. Did we have? Sorry, I'm not thinking about public art, I wanna check on some. Did you notice that this has? Oh, it is, so Main Street Festival, off-street trails, public art, in accordance with city policies. So that is an option. Building materials, so there's a list of permitted brick, stone, wood, concrete, base stucco, architectural metal panels, horizontal wood siding and wood shingles. And then you have prohibited EIFS, concrete block, corrugated metal panels, vinyl siding and fiber cement board. And it says as the primary facade material. And then brick shall constitute 50%, minimum of 50% in Main Street and the downtown edge district, not including the windows. Not including the portion of the building that has been.
Is that Main Street downtown edge just because that's what's already kind of what the standard is there?
Not that we have we don't have a brick requirement
Yeah,
in the CMU. I think we do have material
Mhm.
limitations, but
yeah, I just wonder why it's just in those two,
I think
what's already there.
yes, yeah. Not already in.
Not written, but what's physically.
Yes, the existing character of the buildings,
A
yeah.
lot less just straight up brick building, so.
And, kind of more the core of the core.
Architecturally, you might want to open the door for barrel roof.
What is that?
Well, it's basically a bow.
It's like
a-
yours.
Like a bridge truss.
Like
There's a few of them in town.
like a closet?
Yeah, but
Like
not
that.
a full, so it sets up on your 14-foot
On
wall.
the walls, kind of like the,
Yeah, so
In your building, your,
Yeah.
like
my building is
which one is that?
is a barrel. Art on Seventh. So what was done back in the 40s, right? But it's still a really good and interesting architectural concept to use today. But they put rectangular facades. So from the street, you don't even know you're walking into a barrel roof. And so Art on Seventh, when I walked in there for the first time into that building, we didn't even have a clue. And in fact, the gallery's there because I crawled up in the attic and saw it and had a wet dream and decided to spend a lot of money. But it is a good architectural choice, and there are several of them in Hendersonville. You just don't see them.
In the main event space, that's one.
You don't know they're there because they put rectangular facades up. But it is a choice, and it's a good engineering choice.
So you're saying that this has a curve above
That's
it?
right, you can see it.
That one does too, doesn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, interesting.
And it's it's very durable.
It's just good for storm water.
Water runoff, it all goes to the side channels and out the back, boom, So no water sets on the roof ever. It was an excellent choice, of course, that was decades ago, but,
With fire marshals, with anything with barrel roofs.
oh, no,
There are roofs in the flat
they
facade.
love
Okay,
it, yeah.
that was the only thing I was not sure about, is if like,
I would think, maybe the design standard would be that it would, you'd want it to have at a minimum a rectangular facade so that it didn't present this gymnasium looking thing.
yeah.
That didn't jive with everything else on the street. But from the street, you can't tell. I can tell you from a builder's standpoint, it's actually a pretty interesting and, like that choice gives, if you're using barrel trusses, you can get a bigger clear span than you can with a flat truss.
Guess maybe even it's just for your flat roofs or roofs which present as flat roofs instead of, so you don't have, because I guess technically it has to be barrel if it still looks like a flat roof. Either way, I don't know how the wording needs to be for that.
Yeah, it could have a slate.
Yeah.
Facade.
Yeah, as long as it looks like it's
The
flat.
furniture barn on Washington.
Yeah.
That's actually a barrel with a pitch put on top of it. They covered it up.
Why they cover it up?
Oh, no. So,
That's
but
good.
then when there was a barrel where the garage is now. It was torn down back,
Where the furniture barn?
no, where the parking deck is.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the buildings that the same contractor built. My building.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. So franchise architecture, which needs to be defined, shall be prohibited. That was something I think we talked about. We may want to define what franchise, a regional, I think this came up last time, like a regional franchise.
Standardized, non-conforming,
Is it, so basically like a McDonald's coming in, like
Right.
just like any other McDonald's. But if it has the same materials as,
yeah, they could do it out of brick and
yeah,
make a square in front and find a way to wiggle it.
Yes, standardized franchise architecture should be prohibited. Buildings associated with national regional brands shall be modified to conform to the district. So they'd have to meet the standards.
which for a lot of them, there's probably not that, they probably would mostly fit other than like the drive-throughs and their setbacks.
And they did it in Biltmore Village.
Yeah, but like most of the ones that we see probably, like building materials probably wouldn't be that much per seventh anyway.
Oh, and I don't, these are Biltmore Village level design standards.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think is like, would any of them have to really, like, that's not really gonna prevent any of them. And I guess it's not.
I know. No, they may deter some, be like, well, that's not our thing,
Yeah,
And really be on Main Street.
they'd have to really change
Conform
their
to the-
standard
Right.
Yeah.
to fit. And which in that case, it might be the type of business that might work if they're willing to make that much of an adapted. Like, I mean, Doug Humphrey has chains.
So one more really important topic. So on the signs, we've developed some language that will go in the sign ordinance, but it'll be for this district. It's just not going to be in this section of the code. So we keep all of our sign standards in one place. But it's what you would think of, it's kind of limited building, wall signs and hanging signs and awning signs. All stuff that I don't think is very controversial. And then small cell facilities, these are these standalone poles that are going in the right of way. There was one a wooden pole. I haven't actually seen it yet, put up right near the main event parking lot. Right in downtown. And I don't know if we've put a halt on that one. I can't remember the latest. But, and that's a wood pole. What we want, if they're gonna put in new standalone pole, what we prefer is that they co-locate these antennas. This is for the next generation of cell phone data. They're bringing the poles lower to the ground and more direct to the users. That's a different wavelength, and that's what it requires that. So they really could proliferate, and these have been in the works for 10 years or so. We just really hadn't had a ton, but we've seen them popping up lately, and we want to protect our most prized areas from a proliferation of wooden poles going in the right way. So there's a whole section of requirements that would be citywide that would also address, refer to the downtown design overlay in terms of what the standards would be. So first would be to co-locate. If you can't co-locate, then you would put in a metal pole that matches the color and style of our pedestrian lights or the traffic signal posts, that type of thing. The other big part of this is really for this group, and this was talked about in the downtown master plan, about limiting first floor residential. And that's not uncommon for main streets to not allow first floor residential. This is a clip from the downtown master plan. Within the Main Street district, the ground floors shall be composed of commercial uses. Use of ground floors for private residences is discouraged within the Main Street and downtown edge districts, with exception for townhomes and brownstones or for entry foyers to upper floor units. Private residence entries should incorporate features such as stoops and porches. One way that this could be kind of altered is that it wouldn't be in the storefront. It wouldn't come all the way to the primary frontage, that you could have residential uses in the back that are accessed either down some type of hallway or a rear entry, something like that.
And that was something that came up at the board meeting last month, was like the below grade
Right.
for residential. But the downtown board has talked for a while on, and I think we've kind of had discussion pretty thoroughly on, particularly not having first floor frontage on Main Street. The side streets, I don't know that there's as much of a push on it, but it's just specific on just the Main Street frontage. And I don't know if we want to have that as just the Main Street frontage that's like the MSD area or the historic district area. Because I could see it working to have residential south of Allen, where it's already like where it's undeveloped. So I don't know that we'd want to prevent that necessarily, but then that's kind of changing up some of it's like not necessarily fitting with what the map is, but that's
I think you would want first floor residential anywhere.
probably, yeah, we probably won't mix use.
I mean, mixed use.
I remember the conversation, like, it wasn't exclusionary, it's like we wanted more residents downtown, but we also wanted to maintain that Main Street character of the first ground floor. So it's like, what's the best compromise to do both?
And I think that's a good point, Matt, even on South Main Street, probably would want it, even if apartments were built, we'd probably want commercial first floor.
Well, we talked about it both
Yeah,
Main Street and Sub.
yeah, that's right, that was a separate
Because-
conversation on that rezoning.
Because I know,
Yeah.
there was some discussion about, back door,
Mhm.
but, I'm not in favor of that either, so.
But you're talking particularly specifically on Seventh,
First floor.
but not necessarily in the Seventh district, but on Seventh,
On
exactly, yeah.
On Sub.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So that would be like the two main,
And
maybe that's something on the street type.
yeah, Seventh is downtown and downtown is, well, the main stretch is downtown. What I was thinking is that we could say on primary, frontages.
And that's downtown one way and boulevard.
That would be Main, downtown one way and Boulevard, so King Church, Main, and then Spartanburg Highway, Greenville Highway. Little sections of those, and then along the Coosa Trail.
And cause Seventh is considered down.
Is considered downtown. You can change the designation of Seventh. But I think at the other end of Seventh, it makes sense to be able.
Like further east on Seventh.
Yeah. That would be my, residential dwelling single family on upper flares only on primary street frontages, so I'd have to work on the language.
Yeah.
And this would be in a different section of the ordinance, though we could put it in both sections. So we're leaning maybe towards some of those, maybe the primary frontages like Main, Seventh.
Seems like that would cover.
And we could do a section of Seventh is downtown street,
Yeah.
and not and then allow residential on that, but then the other portion would be.
Yeah, cause I mean, there's residential frontage currently on further east on Seventh as it is.
Down near the bridge.
Yeah.
King and Church fall into the same category.
They on those. They'd have to have some.
Except, well, then you have a hiccup in between Main Street and King and Church, right? Because you're saying on the side streets.
Yeah, which we do have, we have that
Or
infill. New construction build, which I don't. And we've got the one right next door to here. That has, so. Or so are we okay with allowing that?
Could do it in the Main Street district.
Yeah, like, so we do have residential,
There's one on Third. It
yeah,
was just built.
yeah, that new build, and then this one here next door. But that, I mean, that kind of feels like like, they feel like they fit. Kind of there, I think that having them on the,
Especially if you build it, the right way.
yeah, and that new one it's like.
Yeah, if you wanted to limit it on Main Street, the entire Main Street area, which is the real core of the city, you could do it that way and then not limit it anywhere else.
I think doing it based off of the street. Seems like the better way to go, cause then that allows for the avenues to be like how we've done it, and cause that might be the only way for some small parcels like that one that was built over on Third. That might not be a commercial infill
Right.
development, because it's just a small little parcel.
Yeah. Then the only other question was about, and I don't know if this group, but like going out where you have residential, this is R6 and R15, which is single family, 2-family residential zoning. Which doesn't allow any businesses, but because it's all on the trail, there could be some opportunities for some like trail oriented businesses. So curious what this group's thought is on allowing, and this would be limited in size, so there'd be square footage limits for bicycle uses, office, the surface parking lots, we talked about the trailhead parking, small scale multifamily, so a little more density on the trail, and then specialty services, rentals, tour guides, and shuttle services.
And that's just within this area.
Yeah, if you're in R15 and R6 and in the lower trailhead.
Can't tell around here, what's the street where the lower trailhead goes to?
It goes right past Whitted. It'll go like right past Link Station.
Okay,
All that property around Link Station would be in it.
is there? Much places even to build currently along there? Or that would just be like taking homes and,
That's where my head goes, is like, if I wanted to put a business out there, it would need to be least restrictive as possible, or most adaptable as possible, so that if it floods, maybe I can move all my stuff, or if it rains, or it'd be hard to build a structure in that space permanent.
Well, this would change the usage, so you could actually occupy like a house with a.
would work.
There went the battery.
Oh, good.
Or no, just convert existing residential to a commercial use.
So I think I mean, I default more options better, more use better, more potential better, but
That seems like that probably really needs to be with the
Residents, yeah,
residents
I
there.
think there's gonna have to be a conversation there.
That probably would be where the,
And if it's only properties abutting the trail right of way, that's pretty limited. But it also does feel like we've got a really, what was it, about a half acre right next to the trail that someone's trying to divide it into two lots. And it's like, why would you not, put at least a quadplex or something on there and better utilize that land? We're not making more land, and around these types of facilities that major investments by the community, it really feels like that's where people need to be put and placed so that they can be really close to those, hop on their bike, walk.
I think that one of the problems out there, you might have some insight into this, but the cost of the dirt out there is already so exorbitant that, I've had some
Why not
friends.
build 8 units instead of 2?
Well,
That's
whether
not
it's
what we do
units,
it.
but
So-
but not everybody's looking to build, units.
people are just looking to put their house
They
there.
want to create a business, and drop it on the ground. And, that chunk of dirt is well over $1 million. All right, and so, the business isn't no longer viable, right? Because, the bike trail may be great, it may be getting a buzz, right? But it's a lot like Seventh. It's got more traffic than Seventh, but it's still very embryonic. And it's gonna be a long time before that thing is really churning, commercial.
Sure.
True, except for Trailside over there, my gosh.
Yeah, they've really,
Except for them, they got in, yeah,
They just have the right,
they
the
killed.
right mix, the right property to have the right mix and
Yeah.
everything over there.
And they got it when it was cheap,
Yeah,
perfect spot.
yeah,
It was already built.
yeah.
Yeah, like the people that are across from that, what they're asking is, it's sitting there for,
Facility.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's a really high price. And you'd have to build from scratch instead of,
Built.
One of my friends is. Gotta be away, but he says, no.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
I mean, especially, with the DOT closing the trail for big chunks of time this summer and fall.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
And then Brevard is years away from being
Years,
able.
yeah.
Yeah, take time. So as far as this goes,
We
then,
got through it all. What I would like is, to take it to the full board and maybe, there's a brief,
yeah, we don't want to spend a whole hour and a half.
we don't want to do what we just did.
Yeah.
But we can give them the draft ahead of time. For them to review. I can go over, some of the high points, but then if, folks from this committee want to say, we looked at this, we made some suggestions, they were incorporated into the draft and, overall, this committee supports it. Kind of like a recommendation, and then that'll just help kind of streamline. And then if there's comments from people who've reviewed it or, whatever it may be, we can certainly incorporate that. And then get a recommendation from the board that'll go to city council.
I've got one itch. And I want to bring back up, and you mentioned it earlier, it has to do with the signage. Where you were saying posts on Main Street,
Yeah, no freestanding signs would be allowed.
but you're mentioning, you know, the wireless people coming in.
Oh, the small cell, yeah.
Yeah, so. I mean. Every city's gonna experience this, but man, that gives me a rash. Because real estate. On Main Street on Seventh, all right, is already at a premium. We don't have enough space for the benches and bike racks and everything else that we wanna have. And now.
Well,
Somebody,
and we very intentionally pushed all the power, all the utilities are either underground or at the alleys. So that we didn't have any of that junk on Main Street. And these guys, with what happened, the background on this is the cell phone companies knew that this was the technology they needed for the future. They knew it was going to be, they saw the obstacles ahead of them in terms of permitting and going city to city to get all these approvals. And they lobbied, it went straight to Congress and FCC before anybody knew what this stuff was, and got, very broad approvals where cities cannot tell them no. We cannot prohibit them. And they went state by state, and every state adopted these laws, protecting the cell phone companies, allowing them to access the right of way with very, very little say by the city.
but they still thumbed their nose at us. During new construction on Seventh and refused.
To move the poles.
To move the poles or even, put future conduit under the street when it was torn up. That was the dumbest
Mhm.
thing I've ever seen.
Why did they not do that?
Good question.
Let's say,
Because they wanted to charge the city $300,000 to drop some conduit. I'm sorry, you should be laying it for free.
And then they'll come in any day
And
and
cut it up.
dig it up and
Oh, yeah.
and leave
No.
crap there
And
for
they
months.
they will.
We've had several.
yeah, Locust has got a mess down there still.
Oh, yeah.
It took almost a year to get that one hole over by mini batch filled, and the sidewalk over by you after the construction was done,
Right,
for them to finally.
yeah, it's just,
So we have to have, the only little caveat we have is if we have an aesthetic plan adopted. And
So is that
we have to
what
get
this
that,
could be?
that's what this would be, and we have to have it in
done.
before they get vested.
Yeah.
So if they get their permits to put their antennas up before we adopt this, where they can, any of the ones that have been permitted, but then any future ones would be limited.
So that's all the more incentive to get this
Yes.
going.
We have some current language that I don't think is legal, but it's at least, I think, slowed things down, because we say that you can't have a telecommunications tower within 500 feet of a historic district. That was really intended for not this small cell stuff. It was written before that. But it applies because the telecommunications towers, anything that's 20 feet or taller. And these things are taller than 20 feet, so they classify. Some of them are like 40.
Really? Oh my gosh, that would look crazy.
Well, because the technology is not here yet, right? You're 3 to 5 years.
Well, that's the other thing though, like, that is also the way things move, like it will be essential that data be available for people, and that's gonna be part of your economic development strategy as well as a city. So you don't want to turn it down, but you also like, how do we do this in a way that's not a detracting from our district?
30 years ago, they weren't considered like a utility, but now they essentially are. Is there a way to classify what their structure could be or where it could be? Is that what this is meant as?
Yes.
Or at least to say it can't be in these spaces.
It is to say that this is your first, co-locate on existing poles.
Or put it at the back of your alleyways and.
Or on a building, yeah.
Oh,
And then not on Main Street, and, we're kind of, or you make it look just like any other pole. I mean, they can conceal these things in pedestrian lights, like literally install a new pedestrian light that has the antenna in it. So they basically would have to come up with a plan that would satisfy us.
I spent 10 years building cellular networks. And so the planning for tower distribution, right? There's some flexibility, but it's only that much.
Yeah.
Right, because the coverage is the coverage.
Right.
And you have to map that out, and somewhere in that circle, there's gonna be a set of antennas.
Yeah, because they've identified they need it to make their money, keep their customers.
So if they're organized and planning out that way, it's maybe not as productive to just block them and say no. It might just be a better idea to go with it and say, what have you got? Where can we put it?
Yeah, we can't say no
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah.
Um,
The best way is always
working with them, yeah.
negotiate.
the first guys I worked with, when it started when I was in Johnson City, and Verizon guys were great. They were like, if they had all the cards, I mean, they could have just bulldozed us, but they didn't. They were like, hey, we want to work with you guys. These guys had already told us, you guys have no authority here. And so we know who we're working with at least, you know. But so I haven't got the latest because we did have 4 that came in and one that started getting put in already without a zoning permit, but it had gotten an encroachment permit from our previous public works director. And so nobody knew that he had approved it. So now there's a much more high alert amongst everyone that, hey, you know, we need to look at these things if they come in, and we need to adopt some standards for them and yada, yada. So that part of this I put together a draft, use some model language and, but it hasn't really been thoroughly, because that's an add-on. The other stuff came from the downtown master plan. This is being added on. And so it really needs some more attention over the next few weeks before we get to a final draft. I need to revisit that section.
Well, I think that this feels very true to the master plan that we were talking about years ago.
Yeah,
And
great.
It's good.
Yeah, so we'll just make sure for the board meeting to not, it'll be like in 10 minutes or so. They've already seen the initial introduction. This committee's reviewed all of it. We don't need to hash out all of the details of it, hopefully.
Yeah. And if you guys, if you guys see some more stuff in the language.
And it needs to be the Word document, this Word document, this letter, right? So,
Say these.
if you need these back, if you want it, you can keep it. If not, then I'll.
Thank you guys.